when somebody rocks at night. And if they get shot, they offer snitch to the cops. Now tell me this ain't living foul. She just had a baby child and she's back to selling crack vows. On the app, cause she's addicted to the fast cash. Alone with that last before the cops be a minute ass. But honey dip don't wanna listen, cause she's in a position that nobody gives a pot to piss in. Her life is stuck and filled with bad luck, so she fucks and fucks to earn another buck. She don't really care about pride, and she jumps into another ride, then committing suicide.
Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling.
Times is getting hard with this bond, I swear to God. I even got caught trying to steal from the junkyard. A born terror, a rebel without a pause. I never had a good Christmas, so who was Santa Claus? I walk the streets at night with my head down. In this little town, you see clowns that wanna be down, so they get a Glock and lick shots to get props. And when shit rocks, so you can hear as the shells drop. An old man got shot in a parking lot in front of my building. I hang with his grandchildren, and for the nigga that pulled the trigger and tried to slide and hide, but he got knocked by the homicide. And this happens every day around my way, so I pray that I can live another day.
Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling.
Hey yo, get a load of this guy. You know the Mr. Hardy, the one who talks about gats but ain't busting nobody. He speaks that yang yang so he can just maintain. I blow him out the frame and his moms and get gang banged. But his rap is high tech in the projects for his knuckle check, so he got mad respect. The niggas in hoodies packed up, the load of gas met up in the back so they can plan the attack. Wasn't hard to tell that these kids was no joke. They let the pistol smoke and their nine was open and coke. I seen it happen every day where I live. I know a few bums, drug dealers, most of them fugitives.
Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. Hey yo, this goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling. This goes on and on, shot. Everybody's doing their own thing, from hooker and the drug sling.
Come November.
Well, all I can say to you, how would you feel about voting for someone that threw you out of your home and threw you out of your job and ruining your life and your children's lives? There are women here that have been here for, I know, all their lives, 3 and 4 generations. I don't see how they in conscience could vote for someone that would throw them out of their homes, throw them out of their jobs.
Ma'am, what effect do you feel that the expressway will have on the neighborhood?
On the neighborhood, we're all going to move out of New York City for number 1. And the number 2, all Democrats are going to vote for Lindsay.
Where are you going to move?
Oh, any place out of New York. Florida, California. As long as we get out of New York, we can give... That's right, we won't give Mayor Wagner any idea of any taxes or any more. Let him worry about it.
My reaction is that this is the dirtiest trick that Mayor Wagner ever pulled on the people of Broome Street.
Why do you say that?
Because he promised us that he wasn't going to put this thing through. And he turned around and he stuck a knife in our back and he passed this thing. Now, where are all these people going to go that live in this neighborhood that have jobs around here? There's people that are 65 years old, before they reach their 65 years old, they're going to lose their jobs, and they won't be able to get a job no more. So where are they going to go? They all must go on home relief.
I should be Elliot Ness.
Why not?
I'd get killed in this neighborhood.
No, you're home. You're very safe here. One of the safest neighborhoods.
What's this one? Could you move back a bit, sir? That's it. Father, what effect do you feel that the expressway will have on the neighborhood?
Well, the expressway will destroy the neighborhood, in my opinion. I have always felt that, and I have seen no reason now to change my opinion. The neighborhood as a way of life will be destroyed by the expressway.
By the expressway itself or by its after effects?
Well, both. The actual expressway rising in the midst of all these homes, and the after effects, the blighting effects that will come in its wake.
Where will the people go?
Well, I don't know. I think you ought to ask the people that, really. I really would hesitate to say where the people will go.
What would happen to your church?
Oh, the church will come down. The church will be removed to make way for the expressway.
And what's your reaction to that?
That's not a fair question, Mr. Riley.
Why not, sir?
Well, because I have a deep interest in the church and in the neighborhood, you see. It is true that I never fought the expressway to save the church because there are other churches quite close by that could handle the people in case it came through. But at the same time, I would, of course, be sorry to see it go.
What's the charm of this neighborhood?
Well, for me, these are my people, and I love them all, and I feel at home here. So, for me, the charm of the neighborhood is that one is in his own house, as the Latins say. Wherever I go, I am welcomed as a member of the community and the pastor of the local church. And then, of course, there's the Latin atmosphere, the sidewalk cafes, and the Italian flair, you know, which will, of course, be destroyed to a great extent if the expressway comes through and wipes it out. To a great extent, we're destroyed entirely if the expressway comes through and wipes it all out.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all?
No, we're going to
One minute, just me.
Yeah, oh, I'm going to stand too.
Good, I'm with you.
Hey, you might be a good idea to get somebody in Italian and somebody in Spanish.
Definitely, and how we're going to miss it. We feel very hurt, and we think he put a knife in our back. I think it was the worst thing he ever did to us.
What are you going to do about it?
What we're going to do, if we can fight, we're still going to try and fight it. We'll see if we can still fight it.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Sir, what's your reaction to the Lower Manhattan Expressway?
My idea is we would like because the first we're gonna lose the church, we're gonna lose the work, and a lot of people over here because this is not too bad. I mean the strict, the traffic strict over here. So I don't know.
Would your house be torn down?
Yeah.
How about your job? Where do you work? Do you work in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Would that come down also?
Yeah.
What do you intend to do? Where do you intend to live? Where are you going to work?
I gotta find some place else, and we have to find another place to move to.
Why do you like this neighborhood, which is predominantly Italian?
I lived for a long time ago here, so I like this place over here.
Is it friendly?
Yeah.
Safe at night?
Yeah. So that's what I can say.
Okay. Thank you. The expressway.
Higher court if we could. And we're all going to vote against Mayor Wagner. We're all going to vote for Lindsay in order to bring this thing to the higher courts, in order to protect the people of Broome Street.
Why do the people of the neighborhood feel so strongly about the neighborhood itself?
Well, because they love the neighborhood. They're all families around here. Nobody wants to go live in these projects because they have children. And they have to go up on the elevator.
They're not safe for the project.
They're not safe in the project. We read in the papers every day about children being raped, women being raped, going in the elevator. Now, what does a mother have to do to send her child to school? She has to come out in the morning to bring her child down on the elevator to go to school, and then after school has to go back and get her child to bring him back and come up on that elevator. She cannot send her child down if she wants him to go and buy a loaf of bread. She's afraid that somebody would go in that elevator and rape her child. Now, in this neighborhood, we're all safe. We're all families. We all have mothers that live next door to each other. Daughters have mothers that live next door to each other, that they help one another. But if they take them away from these people, there's a lot of people that are going to die of broken-hearted.
Thank you very much. Cut it, Artie. Very good. Reaction to the expressway.
My address?
No. Your reaction to the expressway.
Oh, not good, male, too much male. Because, il sindaco è il fratello di Giuda che tradì a Cristo e lui ha tradito il suo popolo, abbassa il sindaco, that's all.
What does that mean, sir?
He's against it because he betrayed his own people in this neighborhood, he means. Because they said that he didn't keep his promise of that he was going to not put this through, and he says that it's a dirty trick that he did.
You think Mayor Wagner sold you out there?
Yeah, he sold out. Mayor Wagner sold us out.
What do you intend to do about it?
Well, we intend to bring it to higher courts. If we can fight it, we're going to fight it.
He's a brother Judah, he tradit Christ, that's all. He's tradit all people, that's all.
It's just like you would say that Judas is the saint that he traded us. He betrayed Judas. That's what he is. That's what Wagner is. He betrayed us, people.
I think this is the dirtiest thing he ever did. Now these people around here, all
it wasn't a bit necessary to go ahead and to pay a sneak like that on the people of downtown.
He wants the opportunity.
Moses is so damn good. And even your mayor of New York, Bonds is so good.
How do you see it? Is it all right now?
If he was any good, he's no good in this mayor.
Sir, what effect do you think that the Lower Manhattan Expressway will have on the neighborhood?
What's that?
What effect do you think the Lower Manhattan Expressway will have on the neighborhood?
Well, I think that the Lower Expressway, I don't think it's supposed to be around this neighborhood. Of course, there's no traffic at all here. Well, most of the traffic is going over to Staten Island now.
Since the building of the Verrazano Bridge?
That's right. It's 50% going over to Staten Island.
How crowded is Broome Street at rush hour?
Well, it ain't crowded. We have about an hour or so for cars just going along, about 10 cars at a time. That's about all.
In other words, you don't think this road is necessary?
That's right. This expressway is not important around here. That's what I say. And the mayor don't even know himself that he's going after those big ones there.
What do you mean by big ones, sir?
The big shots there that they're paying them off. I mean it.
What do you think
What's that?
What do you think the Lower Manhattan Expressway will do to the neighborhood?
Ruin the neighborhood. Ruin the whole, from Canal Street down over to the park up here. Ruin it up. We'll have nothing here.
Ma'am, what effect do you think the expressway will have on the neighborhood?
Well, I think it'll completely ruin the neighborhood. The Italian people and the other variations of nationalities around here have been together a long time. And by them building this expressway, there'll be no more people around. I don't know. There's no juvenile delinquency around here. This is like a landmark here, as Mrs. What was her name? McGrath said this afternoon.
Rosemary McGrath.
Right. As she said this afternoon, as far as this neighborhood is concerned, it is a safe neighborhood. People can walk through here at all hours.
How about the traffic conditions?
It's not that much traffic. It's like any ordinary city street.
Less than 50% traffic is here. I told you before, it's 50% that's going over the bridge. And about 5 o'clock during the day, the traffic is very little. There's very no traffic at all. And I'm telling you something. Because what they need the tunnel there. That's all they need.
Forget about the votes of Lower New York and Lower Manhattan.
You think the people of this neighborhood will react against the mayor at the voting?
That's right.
Lost his vote.
Certainly
The mayor should drop dead.
Mrs. McGrath, what action does your group plan now?
I don't know. We're too shocked. I just found out the news about 3 hours ago, and I'm completely shocked. I can't understand how Mayor Wagner in 1962 could kill the Lower Manhattan Expressway and today decide to put it through. First of all, the Verrazano Bridge has relieved traffic. 667,000 cars are 667 less cars are going through the Holland Tunnel in the last 4 months since the Verrazano Bridge has been up.
Then Broome Street is not clogged here at rush hour?
At 5 o'clock this afternoon, there wasn't any jam up at all. And a spokesman for the Port Authority building said 6.1% 6.1% less cars. In other words, 667,000 less cars are going through the bridge now in the last 4 months since the Verrazano Bridge was put up. And there is no tie-up at the Holland Tunnel now.
With sentiment running so high against the Lower Manhattan Expressway, and this being an election year, why do you think the mayor approved the superhighway?
I can't imagine why. First of all, he talks about a poverty program and anti-poverty. 10,000 people are losing their jobs, and 80% of these people come from the minority groups, Negroes and Puerto Ricans, employed in the area. 10,000 people are losing their homes. 10,000 of these people, some of them pay $18 a month rent. They can't get anything comparable to that in the city of New York. And he's doing all this to put up an expressway that will be the biggest traffic jam in the city of New York. Now, with the relieving of traffic on from the Verrazano Bridge, there's no reason we don't need an expressway. Why put 10,000 people out of work when he says we need poverty programs, anti-poverty? Well, he's making 10,000 more people go into the streets looking for jobs. Why get rid of 800 businesses? Why put 10,000 people out of their homes? Where are these people going to go? Some of these people have been here for 2 and 3 generations.
He claims they're going to be relocated satisfactorily.
I read his report just a few minutes ago. He has provision for 1/4 of the people. 1/4 of the people, he says, are going to be relocated. What happens to the rest of the people? 3/4. He talks about neighborhoods in New York and safe neighborhoods. This neighborhood, they're talking about closing the James Street Center. Why? Because it has the lowest delinquency rate in the city. He's not making sense. You have a safe neighborhood. You have a good neighborhood here. You have 10,000 people employed. You have 10,000 people thrown out of their jobs. And he's putting up an expressway, which, according to the Port Authority, if I read the papers correctly in the last couple of days, is not necessary.
What effect do you think this will have on the neighborhood itself?
It will destroy the neighborhood.
The whole flavor of the neighborhood?
The whole flavor of the neighborhood. This is the only neighborhood, excuse me, this church here is 50% of these people are Italians and Puerto Ricans, and they live in peace and harmony. It's one of the few neighborhoods that a woman can go down the streets at night and be safe. And the women know it, and I know it. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the men are sitting in the cafes and they're watching you, taking care of you. I don't know of another neighborhood like that. They want to build up neighborhoods like this. They say, let's get back to the old safe neighborhoods. This is it. This is a model neighborhood.
Right. How do you plan to get this message across to Mayor Wagner?
I haven't made any plans yet. I think it would be up to the people here, and whatever way we decide is best. Right now I'm going to say my prayers at church. I don't know what else to do at this moment except go in and pray. Maybe tomorrow we'll figure something out. I can't see how Mayor Wagner, if he has any heart and if he has any reason, you can't put up an expressway that isn't going to solve any traffic problems. If he just wants this money for the unions, they can go in, but they're talking about building apartments up near Freedom Land. There's plenty of jobs up there for the building and trade union. Many of these people here are employed in the building and trade unions. They don't want to build this Lower Manhattan Expressway, but let them speak to the Port Authority building. They said 667 less cars are using it since the Verrazano Bridge went up.
Well, Mr. Mayor, can I ask you, do you plan to use the National Guard or any of the other services available if this gets beyond the emergency point?
Take whatever steps are necessary to meet an emergency.
You think it's an emergency at this time?
It's not a critical emergency now, no, but it can get there very rapidly.
At what point do you think it will be an emergency?
At that point when the Mayor's Emergency Control Board advises me that under all the circumstances, emergency conditions are there. Now they will be listening to the Board of Health, to reports from the Fire Commissioner who's with me today, Police Commissioner who's with me today, and the other service agencies of the government. Get the light with us.
Are you considering calling out the National Guard? Is this one of the things that you have under consideration?
All I can say this time is that I'll take whatever emergency steps are necessary in order to protect the health and welfare of the people of New York City.
Is this the kind of thing you're worried about?
Yes, very much, particularly uncovered garbage like this, spread out in the open. We're afraid of rats, and this should be put inside a container. This plastic container is something that we're experimenting with the Department of Sanitation, and these can be used if the cans are filled. And it'd be far better to have loose garbage put in something like that than to leave it exposed like it is here.
At what point do you think this will reach an emergency level?
Oh, 2 or 3 more days. We haven't had collections in some parts of the city since last Wednesday, so it'll be a week within a couple of days. And at that point, I think it'll very likely be an emergency.
Do you expect the rats to be coming out for the garbage?
Not right away, but it's not a matter of saying that it'll be over Wednesday. It'll take a few days or a week to get all of this accumulated garbage and trash off the street. So within a week, we could have a rat problem.
What things are you suggesting to people for the garbage disposal at this time?
At this time, we're asking them to compact their garbage as much as possible. Someone could have stepped on this and made it a little more compact. We are asking them to cover the cans. This is a bad example of what shouldn't be done. They can put out naphthalene flakes, the same thing mothballs are made out of, to repel rodents. And they also can sprinkle chlorine water, bleach, over it, which kills the odor and would keep rats away.
In the last few years, the social scientist has been looking at Harlem, Brownsville, East New York, South Jamaica. And for here too, if not especially here, must come those men of tomorrow. And the light spoke of Harlem as a stinking slum of violence and antisocial society, where you learn to live by tooth and claw. Ralph Ellison, on the other hand, the author of The Invisible Man, said it might be all of that, a jungle, but also it is a creative forest where you are honed by the hardships of experience and many a creative gem comes forth. Brown spoke of where he was raised, the hard Harlem, central Harlem, from 116th Street to 135th Street, from 5th Avenue to 8th Avenue, where the tight-packed tenements spew forth the overcrowded thousands onto the overheated streets. Ralph Ellison has lived on Sugar Hill from 145th to 168th Street, St. Nicholas to Riverside Drive, overlooking Harlem from the heights and cooled by the breezes of the Hudson. His thoughts, urbane and sophisticated, his view perhaps dimmed by the distance. We spoke to some people on the streets. Just what is Harlem, we asked them? A shaper of men to strengthen them for the later life? A step up? Or a spawning den of fight for life, any way you can? Fight to live.
He's exposed to everything, no pushes, everything, low. It's out here in the street every day. He got to see it, he got to come in contact with it. So there's nothing he can do about it. He's got to go to school, he got to see it. All the way back home, he got to see it. So there's nothing you can do about it.
I don't know, it's pretty rough because like, if you mind your own business and don't nobody bother you, but if you go out looking for trouble, you'll find it.
When I came here to New York from South Carolina, I didn't even know what drugs were. You tell me about numbers, I didn't even know what numbers were. Prostitutes, I didn't even know what prostitute was. But as I came here and being in the street among these people that do these things, I learned all these things. Now I would be like a genius in it. I mean, I don't use narcotics, I don't drink, I don't smoke, but I just walk. And every moment of my day walking in the streets, I crave for one thing. I want to become a leader. I want to become a leader, not leader like the leaders they have, like Martin Luther King's Clayton Powell. I want to be a leader of kids, like all these here buildings they have for churches. I want kids to come in there, small kids like that kid there.
Would you like to grow up somewhere else?
Yes.
Where?
In the country.
Why?
Because I can have a bike out there.
You can't have a bike here. Why not?
Because my father said if I ran the street, I might get hit by a car, so I'd rather grow up in the country.
Thank you. Good, very good. To each human being, his neighborhood is unique, and so is Harlem. But each neighborhood is only a transient stopping-off place, a few years long. As you grow, you move. The hope for those who live here in Harlem is that one day they too may be able to move, leaving the yesterdays of Harlem behind, like Ralph Ellison, and to walk forth without the scars of their youthful stopping-off place, Harlem, to do this like Claude Brown. This is Chris Borgen, WCBS-TV News, on Riverside Drive, overlooking Harlem.
A dozen states are holding senatorial and gubernatorial primaries tomorrow, and for some of the familiar names, Hubert Humphrey, Minnesota, Edward Kennedy in Massachusetts, it appears to be mostly a formality. But in New York, the race for the Senate is crowded and close. David Culhane reports.
Senator James Buckley, running as a conservative, won his first term in 1970 with only 39% of the vote, beating a Democrat and a Republican. This time he is starting off with conservative and Republican Party endorsements. The Ford Republicans in New York have apparently forgiven Buckley his abortive bid for the presidential nomination in Kansas City this summer. So all Buckley has to do now is beat out 6 other candidates who are bent on unseating him. First, there is Republican Congressman Peter Pizer, who is giving up a safe seat in the House to run against Buckley. Pizer thinks Buckley is too conservative. Buckley completely ignores Pizer, and if the congressman wins, it would be a major upset. The distinguished gentleman singing Coney Island Baby is Daniel Patrick Moynihan, one of 5 Democrats running for the Senate. Moynihan is a Harvard professor, a sometime aide to Presidents Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, and most recently ambassador to the United Nations for President Ford. He's here at a beach club in Brooklyn because these Jewish voters can amount to 35 to 40% of the electorate in a Democratic primary. Flamboyant, controversial, Moynihan is halfway home because of his defense of Israel at the UN. But only halfway. Sharing the front-running position with him is Congresswoman Bella Abzug. Just as flamboyant and controversial as Moynihan, Mrs. Abzug has maintained her political base among feminists, liberals, and the New Left, and after 5 years in Congress, she has developed a record as an effective legislator. She repeatedly scores Moynihan for taking a job under Nixon and says Moynihan's personal campaign against her reminds her of his one-time Republican boss.
This kind of tactic, by the way, of Moynihan and his supporters is very reminiscent of the Nixon-Ford dirty trick, particularly Nixon.
If anybody thinks that serving a president of the United States is somehow a matter to have to explain or to apologize for, then they do not think as I do.
But there are more Democratic candidates. This is Paul O'Dwyer, currently City Council President in New York and a warhorse of the Democratic left. He has organization support this year, but probably not enough to win. And this is Ramsey Clark, Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson and an upset winner of the 1974 Democratic Senate primary. Clark lost to Jacob Javits that year. And finally, Abraham Hirschfeld, a right-of-center Democrat and a millionaire builder of parking garages. His lavish spending got him 24% of the vote in the 1974 primary, and he could do the same again and further splinter the Democratic result. So with the Democrats once again trying to kill each other, James Buckley's enigmatic smile may be saying he thinks he might still be senator come November. David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
3 persons from the Springfield, Massachusetts area pleaded innocent today.
While some New York physicians are staying off the job in protest over the state's new malpractice insurance law, thousands of New York City employees who also provide vital service may be forced from work. The city is broke, and people with the noses to remember how a similar situation affected the city are probably already getting out their clothespins.
This is what the streets of New York looked like in February of 1968 when sanitation workers went on strike for higher wages. Today, union men say this nightmare could repeat itself, but this time for a different reason. Under a so-called crisis budget introduced last week, sanitation forces would be cut by 1/3, and union officials say that will leave the streets of New York with oceans of garbage.
You'd have rats that are attracted by garbage that's left out in the street. You'd have vermin. You'd have the garbage spilled all over the sidewalks. It would be a disastrous situation.
But sanitation workers aren't the only ones affected in the new budget presented by Mayor Abraham Beame. He says 14,000 teachers, 5,000 police officers, and 2,300 firemen must go because the city has fallen on hard times. And here's why. It costs $1 billion a month to run New York. $1/2 billion of it is borrowed from banks. The city has been going to the banks for money for years now in order to keep its multitude of humanitarian programs intact, the things that have in many cases brought people to New York in the first place. City hospitals, tuition-free city college, parks, playgrounds, museums, and welfare. Many poor people have actually migrated to New York because they knew here they would find assistance. And as long as the economy remained relatively stable, mayor after mayor was able to keep borrowing to maintain Manhattan generosity. Enter the recession. The big banks cut off credit. Inflation pushed the cost of city services way up. And by late this spring, New York faced the prospect of going broke. Mayor Beame went to Washington for help, only to be turned down by President Ford. Then his dreaded crisis budget became a reality.
We've been denied the cash that we need to operate.
We've heard the echoes in financial houses and in our state and national capitals, echoes that are magnified in editorial columns which are more concerned with numbers than with people. The message is clear. New York must submit to a cold turkey treatment, or it gets no cash.
Yesterday, the state came to the rescue, offering to set up Big Mac, a new agency that would figure out a way for New York to pay its bills. But Big Mac could do nothing to preserve municipal jobs. Mayor Beam blames the banks. So do the municipal unions that this week withdrew a whopping $15 million from one bank that had refused to loan the city money. Today, 15,000 municipal employees are expected to come here to the financial district in New York. They will demonstrate in front of the banks they say are responsible for the elimination of 68,000 of their jobs. But their protests will probably do little good unless Mayor Beam can find another way to balance his budget. And right now, he has none. Betty Ann Bowser, CBS News, New York.
New York's financial horror may be offset by the firing of tens of thousands of its workers, such as firemen, but that could be the final blow to the South Bronx, a fire-ravaged wasteland whose predominant sound is that of fire sirens.
The South Bronx, believed by officials to be the worst fire area in the country. There were 12,300 fires here last year. 43 people were killed. An unknown number of families were displaced. So far this year, at least 2,300 fires. Recently, on one evening, there were 40 fires in a 1-mile area. There's an average of 30 fires a day. It is as if there is a war going on, and many parts of the South Bronx look like a city under siege, with entire blocks wiped out, buildings gutted, debris everywhere. This is a depressed area of about 800,000 people. No matter where they are never far from the sound of sirens. There is a high incidence of welfare, and the unemployment rate is among the highest in the nation. During the recession, it has reached disaster proportions. Some of the unemployment is caused by the fires. One man, who was an apartment superintendent, now makes his home in a shanty across the street from the burned-out apartment building.
If I don't report him or her or whoever's doing this, if I don't put them to the police or police officers, I will take care of that myself. I will become a criminal.
In trying to explain the fires, many people will say that the city of New York has turned its back on them. But there are more reasons.
I think that the landlords are responsible for it because they want to collect the insurance, you know.
The Bronx District Attorney's Office is ready to level charges against landlords accused of setting fires or of hiring someone else to set them in order to collect insurance. Some fires, accidentally or intentionally, are set by vandals, children, addicts, and derelicts. Some fires are believed to be set by residents themselves out of frustration with substandard living conditions. It is an ironic fact that people who have been burned out of their homes find it easier to get relocation money from the city. There are fires set by thieves who use torches to strip the buildings of brass mailboxes and other valuable metals. One bright spot is Fox Street, where several buildings are being renovated. But the Fox Streets are few, and even the people who have moved here find it hard to shake the memories of the old way of life.
I couldn't sleep. When night come, I've been sleeping and been listening. It's a miserable, terrible condition to live like that.
For the firefighters, scarcely an hour goes by without a distress signal. They come back time and again to extinguish fires in the same location. They wonder whether it's worth it.
Well, it's very frustrating. And the building that you're saving is a piece of junk. There's no roof on this particular building. The stairwells are out. And very hazardous. A guy could get hurt very easily in there. The building should be torn down.
The city has thrown in more than 200 special investigators to try to end the wave of destruction, but the burning continues. Lee Thornton, CBS News, New York.
Today's payday for New York City's employees, but the employer is broke. So it's doing what a lot of us do, write out the checks anyway and then run down to the bank in the afternoon to borrow the money to cover them. Officials say the emergency funds will come from real estate dealers who, in a special deal, are paying their property taxes early and thus getting a discount. New York's financial horror may be offset by the firing of tens of thousands of its workers, such as firemen, But that could be the final blow to the South Bronx, a fire-ravaged wasteland whose predominant sound is that of fire sirens.
The South Bronx, believed by officials to be the worst fire area in the country. There were 12,300 fires here last year. 43 people were killed. An unknown number of families were displaced. So far this year, at least 2,300 fires. Recently, on one evening, there were 40 fires in a 1-mile area. There's an average of 30 fires a day. It is as if there is a war going on, and many parts of the South Bronx look like a city under siege, with entire blocks wiped out, buildings gutted, debris everywhere. This is a depressed area of about 800,000 people. No matter where they are never far from the sound of sirens. There is a high incidence of welfare, and the unemployment rate is among the highest in the nation. During the recession, it has reached disaster proportions. Some of the unemployment is caused by the fires. One man, who was an apartment superintendent, now makes his home in a shanty across the street from the burned-out apartment building.
If I don't report them or her or whoever doing this, if I don't put them to the police officers, I will take care of that myself. I will become a criminal.
In trying to explain the fires, many people will say that the city of New York has turned its back on them. But there are more reasons.
I think that the landlords are responsible for it because they want to collect the insurance, you know.
The Bronx District Attorney's Office is ready to level charges against landlords accused of setting fires or of hiring someone else to set them in order to collect insurance. Some fires, accidentally or intentionally, are set by vandals, children, addicts, and derelicts. Some fires are believed to be set by residents themselves out of frustration with substandard living conditions. It is an ironic fact that people who have been burned out of their homes find it easier to get relocation money from the city. There are fires set by thieves who use torches to strip the buildings of brass mailboxes and other valuable metals. One bright spot is Fox Street, where several buildings are being renovated. But the Fox Streets are few, and even the people who have moved here find it hard to shake the memories of the old way of life.
I couldn't sleep. When night come, I've been sleeping and been listening. It's a miserable, terrible condition to live like that.
For the firefighters, scarcely an hour goes by without a distress signal. They come back time and again to extinguish fires in the same location. They wonder whether it's worth it.
Well, it's very frustrating. And the building that you're saving is a piece of junk. There's no roof on this particular building. The stairwells are out. And very hazardous. A guy could get hurt very easily in there. The building should be torn down.
The city has thrown in more than 200 special investigators to try to end the wave of destruction, but the burning continues. Lee Thornton, CBS News, New York.
The hour-by-hour drama of New York's financial crisis provided the first good look at what a default of this type and magnitude could mean. Robert Shackney in New York and Bob Schieffer in Washington tell the story.
The argument that almost brought default had been fought for a week in privacy between city and state officials and the teachers' union on the issue of proposed school budget cutbacks and layoffs. The argument went public in late afternoon yesterday when trustees of the teachers' union pension fund were called on to lend the city $100 million, money the city was counting on to help pay its bills today and avoid default. By early morning, the teachers had given their answer.
I'm sorry to have to tell you that the teachers' pension system has voted against making the commitment to us, and I've told them that I thought it was rare to be on the crossroads of history where one person with one vote can determine the fate of a great city.
I just deeply resent that one group is being singled out when there are plenty of other funds, and no pressure is being put on the others. And I think it's unfair. And my general response when that sort of unfair treatment is thrown my way is to resist very strongly.
Mayor Abraham Beam's public response was to attempt to notify the president in Washington that default seemed imminent and unavoidable, the situation critical.
He was asleep, but we left the message with the officer on duty.
The president finally learned that the mayor had tried to call when he woke up at 5 o'clock this morning. He immediately called a top economic aide here and ordered a series of meetings, but if word that those meetings were being held raised hopes in New York that federal aid would be authorized for the city, the hopes were soon dashed, with spokesman Ron Nesson telling reporters the meetings were merely to monitor developments and the president was still firmly against any kind of federal aid for New York. Later in the day, Nesson went before cameras here to sum up the administration feelings.
In response to the question on why isn't New York treated like a community struck by natural disaster, this is not a natural disaster. It's not an act of God. It's an act brought about by the people who have been running the financial affairs of New York City for the last 10 or 12 years.
The administration stuck to that position through the day, saying it was up to New York State and New York City to solve the city's problems. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, in the White House press room.
The apparent high probability of default didn't do anything to most of New York in the first hours. For most New Yorkers, it was business and life as usual. But in the stock market, prices dropped noticeably, some 7 points in the first hours of confusion after trading started. There was almost no trading in municipal bonds. And at the municipal building, where payment was supposed to be made on $453 million in city notes falling due, note holders who showed up to collect their money in the morning were told to come back in the afternoon. And not all the potential losers were rich people.
He has no checks now. He'll have them perhaps at 11 or 12.
11 or 12 o'clock today.
I don't know. He told the other gentleman 2. So your guess is as good as mine.
How long did you have to work to save $25,000 to invest in New York?
Well, I've worked now for 30 years, over 30 years.
And now it's all in that other
That's
side
right,
of the counter.
I'm retiring, and I need that money and want it, and I expect to get it.
It wasn't just near default on debt in city notes. In the early afternoon, for a temporary lack of funds, officials ordered payments stopped on sanitation men's salary checks. But for all the troubles, it never quite got to default. 1 hour before the banks would have closed, the teachers' union backed down.
No one else was coming forward to save the city. And we were convinced that if we did not come forward, there would be tremendous suffering, and the problems of both the schools and the city and the unions would be much greater.
When word reached Wall Street at 2:30 in the afternoon that default had been averted, the Dow Jones averages jumped 10 points. Word quickly went to the banks, and some banks kept their doors open well into the evening to pay the city notes now that there was money to pay it with. And for those worried people trying to redeem their city notes, relief.
We're ready to hand out the checks right now. I'm confident that if there was any fear of some of the big corporations going down or the banks going down, there would have been a much more, instead of much more, a response from Washington on it.
I have issued the following telegram to the President of the United States. Dear Mr. President, New York, by exhausting all of its resources, can meet its obligations until December 1st. After then, the welfare of our citizens rests in the hands of our federal government. I seek your cooperation and leadership.
It's evident that in the view of New York, what happened today was just a chapter in a financial saga that's by no means over. City officials say that in December, without federal help, the city will default on $500 million of debt, be unable to pay another $500 million in expenses, including meeting payrolls. Tomorrow, the city's biggest bankers will be going to Washington to testify before the Senate, asking for federal help to prevent default. What happened today will have given them some extraordinary ammunition. Robert Shackney, CBS News, New York.
Western European leaders and financial experts have expressed concern over the effect a New York City default would have worldwide. Bob Simon in London has a sample of that opinion.
The city, London's financial district, isn't panic-stricken about New York, but there is in that British phrase, genuine concern. What bankers and politicians here are afraid of is that bankruptcy in New York would slow down the American economy and thus delay recovery in Europe. Andrew Knight is editor of The Economist, Europe's most important economic weekly.
The last thing that we need in this country and in other European countries at the moment is for the American banking system to become cautious about its lending. We see very encouraging signs at the moment of a revival of business confidence in the United States. We depend on it, not just Britain, the other European countries, and Japan as well. Now, the United States depends on some of the Europeans, but we really depend on seeing the great flywheel of the world economy start spinning again. Now, if we are going to have a bankruptcy which makes the banks cautious about their lending so that the flywheel slows down just as we thought it was going to speed up, then we're going to be in trouble.
What is the European view, particularly the view in European banking circles, of how the United States, the presidency in particular, has dealt with New York's crisis?
Irresponsible.
Despite his denials, Europeans believe President Ford will eventually come to New York's rescue because he has to. As one London banker put it, cities, like countries, simply don't go bankrupt. Bob Simon, CBS News, London.
Despite that late surge, stocks closed mostly lower on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost more than 5 points. The average price per share fell 17 cents on the New York Stock Exchange, 7 cents on the American.
Ain't that nice? A family in their Jeep Cherokee. He's taking a kind of rough road. Say, it's a good thing that Cherokee has four-wheel drive. That country's mighty mean. It'd tear up an ordinary machine, but that Cherokee has high ground clearance, nearly as high as yours. And she sure can climb hills. If you wasn't so beautiful, Jezebel, I'd trade you in on a Jeep Cherokee.
Oh, good morning, Mary. Hi, Sue. How's the family? All fine, thanks, except my husband. Phil? Nothing serious. He knows he needs a laxative, but he doesn't like the taste. No problem. Look, X-Lax pills. No taste. X-Lax pills? Good idea. But do they work?
Oh, they work just fine, because they contain a medically proven effective ingredient.
Gentle?
Gentle. You'll see.
X-Lax pills. He'll like the change.
Lots of folks need help now and then.
The Big Apple is New York, but it's hardly the same city it was when Jimmy Walker or Fiorello LaGuardia presided down at City Hall. Oh, it's still big, bigger than many states by most measures, and its problems are even bigger. They have improved since New York's last fiscal crisis in 1975, but now the city is looking again for help from Uncle Sam. The man who must deal with New York's money problems is a character who, if he weren't for real, might have been created by playwright Neil Simon. His name is Ed Koch, a liberal Democrat who ran for mayor on a pretty conservative, get-tough platform. Since his election, one of his critics has called him Mayor Mouth. He doesn't like that.
You ask me a question, I give you a response. You provoke me in the sense of confrontation. I am not a punching bag. I punch back.
Part of New York's problem is image, and this state-sponsored ad tries to raise some enthusiasm for the city. But New York needs more than love. Senator William Proxmire, the city's harshest critic, loves New York but opposes federal aid.
Because I think it is a very bad example to bail New York out now. I think that the disciplines are very weak in the public sector against excessive spending and waste. And I think one of the disciplines is the specter of default and of bankruptcy. You lose that, you lose a lot. And I think that if we lose it with New York, then we're going to have Detroit and Philadelphia and Milwaukee and Chicago later on coming and say, guarantee our bonds.
New York City has 250,000 union workers, and they are well aware that their contracts are on Washington's mind. They have all agreed to begin bargaining months before their contracts are up. The leader of the largest coalition is Victor Gottbaum.
It's like an industry that's on the brink. And the workers know this, the labor leaders know it, and management knows it. 60,000 jobs have gone down the drain. 2.5 billion of our pension funds are now invested in the city, so that no one really has an advantage. The difficulty is a city in crisis, and we know that.
Why should anyone give a damn what happens to New York?
Well, I think it should be the pride of America. It's the premier city of the world, and we've all made an investment, not just money, but a spiritual investment in this city.
Do you think that'll sell in Peoria, or Seattle, or Denver?
Well, I know that there is a relationship which sometimes swings from love to hate, but I think love is coming to the fore.
This message is what New York heard in the 1975 crisis. The next year, President Ford was defeated by New York's votes for Carter. This year, the Carter administration is in favor of some support for New York, but now Congress is getting tough, waiting to look at those union contracts. It was a transit strike in 1966 that established the city's giveaway image. New Yorkers suffered for almost 2 weeks, and then the city gave in. It was felt that then Mayor John Lindsay at first provoked Union leader Mike Quill, then gave up too much to him.
Can I give you the difference between John Lindsay and myself?
Please.
Well, you see, if you talk about John Lindsay, he probably gave more way to the labor unions than any mayor this town has ever had. And it, in my judgment, related to the fact that he dealt with them in a very personal way. I mean, it was, they dealt with him in a macho way. I mean, he said, I am the mayor, and Mike Quill said, we'll see about that, Mr. Lindsley. That's a classic story. Well, that's not my style. I'm someone who says to any labor union leader, and they've all been in this office, and I've been in their offices, I'm just an ordinary Joe, just like you.
Ed Koch got to stop this common man nonsense. He's there because 8 million New Yorkers, in their wisdom, voted him in as mayor.
It's just me.
They follow you everywhere?
Well, what can I do? Hi. Hi. Nice to say hello. Terrific kids. Hi. Hi. How am I doing? Thank you.
I think he's afflicted with the disease that many new officials have. I think Carter had it for a while and he's getting over it. I think Ed has it and he has to start getting over it. You come into a new important office, you've been successful as a candidate, you have this urge and almost a need to continue to be the candidate.
Do they have any smoked mozzarella?
I think over there they must have it.
Yeah, but I'll be able to get it here,
Got
right?
any smoked mozzarella over there?
Smoked.
Smoked. The best.
Whatever you give everybody else, that's all I want.
And I think he also represents what I see as a kind of new type in the country.
Which is?
This sort of bachelor workaholic whose whole life is politics. I think Jerry Brown seems to be that way, and in a way Ralph Nader seems to be like this.
Jack Newfield, a Village Voice editor, supported Koch's opponent for mayor.
I think he is, in a way, arrogant and uptight about any criticism, which he personalizes and then enlarges in his mind. I think it is a personality problem.
The mayor's official residence is Gracie Mansion, an elegant 18th century building overlooking the East River. Koch spends just 4 nights a week here. At first, he didn't like it at all, claiming he rattled around in here by himself.
He may well be a very successful mayor because it is all he cares about in this world. And I think that is a plus. When if you can go to 8 political dinners every night and 4 planning board meetings, and then meet with your staff at 2 in the morning, it gives you a certain competitive advantage over your rivals who have to worry about taking the kids to Coney Island or staying home with the wife.
Hi.
Even though he has the city-owned mansion, Koch maintains a modest lifestyle, which includes shopping and casual walks around Greenwich Village.
Nice to say hello.
He keeps his old apartment here. 3 tiny but pleasant rooms. The New York Times ran editorials against his spending too much time here.
Initially, they didn't like it, and they said I should live at Gracie Mansion. Then they finally gave in, and they said, well, all right, let him think of it as Camp David. Okay, if that satisfies them. I'm paying for Camp David. I am paying the rent on that place.
As contrived as some of his statements seem, sometimes his obvious love for the city just bubbles over.
You know, just to tell you something, if you're interested, New York City has these water towers. Nobody's aware of them, but they're all over. You notice? There. That one over there, that's a water tower just concealed. But I happen to like it when the water towers are suddenly on you. You see them. I mean, it's extraordinary. There's a very nice water tower. What a great city. Very few of them like this. In fact, there's none.
My friend Alex Coburn says that most politicians are megalomaniacs, but Koch is a micromaniac in that he does pretty good on the big things like the fiscal negotiations and running the city, but it's the trivial things that somehow trigger whatever his hang-ups are.
Case in point, a meeting with a community group led by a local priest.
I said, Father, I would like to make a 2-minute statement before we begin. He said, we will have to caucus. Then with the 8 jurors and the pastor, they spend 5 minutes caucusing, and then he comes back and he says,
the panel have decided that they will grant you 1 minute. No. If you are unwilling to accept that, then we are unwilling to have you. You received a copy of the agenda on Friday. It was relayed to you through your press secretary, Ms. Pam Channon, on Thursday, and we are unwilling to accept your conditions.
Father, I can just tell you, I'm not here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koch. I'm sorry.
Are you sorry you walked out?
Not at all. I would do it again under similar situations.
Do you think it was a net minus for you politically?
No, but it wouldn't make any difference to me if it were a minus. There are some things you have to do, whether they are politically helpful or politically harmful, and one is always to maintain your own self-respect. For me, to submit to any audience that said that I could not address them for 2 minutes at the opening, when I had told them I'm prepared to stay for 2 hours or as long as they wanted to answer any of their questions, to stay under those circumstances, I'd have no respect for myself.
Koch even took the snowstorm personally. He, 8 million people can't get out of their house, and he says, God is testing me.
They would always ask him at the end, how am I doing? And one of them is a Republican district leader. She said, I'm a Republican. I love you.
Not so strange. A Forum magazine survey claims most women consider Ed Koch appealing.
Oh, you know what? And she said, and you really are a sex symbol.
The papers made much of it. One of Koch's campaign managers had been Bess Meyerson, a former Miss America. She was his constant companion through the campaign, which worked to offset the political disadvantages of Koch's bachelorhood. His opponent, Mario Cuomo, is a family man. Why have you never gotten married?
Well,
Mark, that's asking kindness.
No, I understand that. I mean, if I had gotten married and I had been divorced, would you ask me why had I gotten divorced? That's a very personal matter. I don't preclude getting married. I think it's terrific if you have a happily married life. If I never am married, so be it. I would hope that that might not be the case, but I do not consider it to be a burden either way.
These kinds of questions in the campaign led inevitably to questions by your opponents raising the homosexual issue,
yes.
One way or the other.
Oh, it was disgusting. And what was so marvelous was the reaction of people who voted. I think they were disgusted by it.
Yeah, there were sound trucks in Queens that said, vote for Cuomo, not the homo. There were sound trucks in the Bronx that said a vote for Cuomo was a vote for the mafia. That is politics in New York.
How important are ethnic loyalties in New York elections?
They are decisive.
I'm as Jewish as you can get in the sense of identification with my heritage. I love being Jewish. Just as, I don't know, you're probably a WASP.
I am a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Right. I say that with affection. Right?
I understand.
Oh.
But it occurs to me, there's a school of thought that's saying, listen, part of the reason New York City may have some difficulty in getting support is that so many people in Kansas and Texas and Colorado see it as the Jewish capital of the country.
Yeah, that's true. That is one of the perceptions of the city, and the facts are that the Jewish population is probably around 19% of the city of New York. There is undoubtedly anti-Semitism to some degree in the hearts of some people in this country. Listen, if you were to ask me, are there Jews who don't like Christians? Of course there are. Are there Christians who don't like Jews, blacks, whites, whatever it is? I mean, it's the nature of our society that the bigot will always be there. But I think in reduced form. I think that overwhelmingly today, that people don't care about that anymore. They don't really care about that. And I honestly don't believe that the rest of the country will refuse aid to the city of New York because either its mayor is Jewish, which happens to be me, or because it has a large Jewish population. I just don't believe it.
Well, I think so far Mayor Koch has been a good mayor. I think he was a fine congressman, and I think he's done the right things. He's taken the right position. He's been a hard line on holding down expenditures. And I think that a lot of things he's criticized for his style, you know, the fact that he does his own laundry and he didn't take a limousine to be inaugurated. But I think that style is important, as it was with respect to President Carter.
My relationship with the president is excellent. He's gone out of his way to refer to me as his good friend, and he called me here at City Hall when I came back from Washington not long ago to say that he, the president, was going to lead the fight to help New York City.
Do you have any higher ambitions? Like
No.
to be president yourself?
No. No. I have no desire, and that's not a political statement, that's an honest statement. I have no desire to ever run for any other position other than re-election to the mayoralty. The desk that we're here sitting next to, this is Mayor Fiorello H. LaGuardia's desk. And I hope that someday there'll be some item in this room that people will say, you know, that was Mayor Ed Koch's.
The next few months will tell the story of what happens to Ed Koch's image. The threat of a transit strike is behind him, but now city workers refuse to accept less than the transit workers got. How to come up with that much money and still convince Congress he's keeping a close eye on the budget is his dilemma. Ed Koch, to say the least, is a mayor with problems.
Ford Motor Company hates rust. To fight rust...
This is National Dance Week, and those of you who were with us yesterday will recall our special report on the explosion of interest in ballet in this country. Well, everyone with a set of ears has heard the other dance explosion these days, an explosion of disco dancing. Disco dancing is not just big with the kids now. For those in the industry, it is big money. How big? Well, Betsy Aaron has been exploring that, and this morning she has a report.
Disco has spread through the land, its movement as resolute as Sherman's march to the sea. Its repetitious drum beat pounding through speakers in so-called exclusive discotheques like Studio 54 in New York, and drowning out conversations in places like the Side Door in Dover, Delaware.
I like it. I love the disco sound.
It's the only thing that I've ever found here that has any kind of togetherness at all.
It's the music. It's pulsating, you know?
Disco has been in the closet for years and years and years. The gay community in the U.S. was the first basically to latch on to the disco phenomenon. And it has come up through those roots. And it's gotten to the point now whereas the major record labels cannot ignore what's happening.
In 1978, disco record sales were over $50 million, about 15% of the record market, and reportedly double the 1977 figure.
Fun. That's disco. That's really what it's all about.
It's also all about money.
It's got a lot to do with it.
big money.
A lot of money.
The industry estimates it's an $8 billion a year business, and that's just for what discos charge for admission, food, and drinks.
Nobody really knows everything about disco. It's too new. If everybody really knew, it wouldn't be an $8 billion a year industry. It would be much larger than that.
And there's more. Clothes, lights, and sound systems. So much money to be made from the business of disco that Billboard magazine now stages 2 conventions a year so promoters can promote their products.
Since the advent of Saturday Night Fever and making the mass market aware of disco, now the sales are going to substantially increase, from radio stations picking up on disco records, disco formats sweeping the country.
Have no fear, Bacchus here. Bacchus my name and disco's my game. We'll boogie down until 10 o'clock tonight with the best disco sounds in the nation.
New York City's WKTU, Disco 92. According to the ratings, it's the most listened to radio station in the country. Commercials are held to a minimum, none during the lunch hour, and you can listen commercial-free from midnight to 5:30 every morning. Owned by the San Juan Racing Association, the station, before its change to all disco last July, had an annual income of $300,000. That figure is expected to increase 10 times this year. This man put FM WKTU on its disco feet. He says it all started in a restaurant where he watched disco for the first time.
The room was completely filled, wall to wall, with people. And they were, of course, people from an upper socioeconomic bracket. And that was really the thing that triggered my decision.
In, out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
It's Friday night at an Arthur Murray dance studio.
What you want to do is when you roll in, make sure this arm comes over.
7 lessons for $75, 1 hour a week. And as the ads say, anyone can disco.
Business is fantastic, and you got people that are 60, you got people that are 20, you got people that are 30, and they're out dancing.
The mass appeal of disco makes businessmen optimistic. The industry's growing so fast, no accurate accounting can be made. Some still say it will never last. They said that about Benny Goodman and rock and roll. But kids do it. Roller skaters do it. People in Peking do it. And in a recent promo for public television, with a little fancy editing, the greatest ballroom dancers of them all are doing it.
I haven't stopped dancing yet. With you, my only partner. I haven't stopped loving you less. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright, it's alright. I haven't stopped dancing. Sweet, sweet child. I haven't stopped dancing yet. I haven't stopped dancing yet. Since we met on our first day, I haven't stopped loving you less. It's alright, it's alright, it's alright, it's alright.
And Tuesday morning on CBS will continue at 6 minutes before the hour.
In New York City this week, it's been a little like the days of Beatlemania some 20 years ago. Crowds of young people converging on a hotel to welcome their rock heroes. This time, though, the flavor is Latin, not English, and instead of yay, 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 it is CC. As Marlene Sanders reports, Menudo is hit town.
They're a sensation in the Spanish-speaking world. In Mexico City, they drew a crowd of 105,000, and throughout Latin America, their appeal has caught on big. And this weekend, they've sold out 4 shows in New York at Madison Square Garden. There are 5 of them, all Puerto Ricans. They range in age from 13 to 15, and their fans are even younger. Menudo in Spanish means small, as in small change, but the group known as Menudo means big money and big crowds, mostly of pre-teenage girls. Many of them came to JFK Airport at 9 in the morning, even though the group wasn't due in until 5 in the afternoon, and the temperature was in the 90s. Some of the kids belonged to Menudo fan clubs.
We listen to their records, we practice.
Practice what?
Their dances, how to dance like them. We dress like them sometimes.
What's the special thing about them?
They sing nice, they dance nice, they're cute. They're gorgeous, especially Charlie.
At last, their young heroes arrived on their own plane, minus Ricky, who had the flu and would fly in later in time for their show. The group was the brainchild of Edgardo Diaz, who at one time worked for Up With People, a conservative American music group with idealistic overtones.
I thought there was something missing in the music. There's music for the kids and from adults, but nothing for the preteens. And for that reason, I began with Menudo.
The group must be kept perpetually young to guarantee its appeal to preteens. Few of the performers stay beyond age 15 as telltale beards and deeper voices develop. Since its founding in 1978, Menudo has become an industry: movies, records, clothing, and souvenirs, and a weekly Spanish-language television show in New Jersey. Success can have its drawbacks. The boys are virtual prisoners in their hotel because of the fans. Does it bother you, all these girls screaming and carrying on?
No, that is my work, and I like.
Miguel is now 15. He's beginning to look too old for Menudo. He's been told it's all over in August. He says he's unhappy and happy about it.
I'm going to give the opportunity to another kid to enjoy it, the group that I can enjoy. But happy, I will miss them. They're like my brothers.
Menudo is learning English and reaching out for a new audience.
Get yourself together. Time's come for you to make the move.
There will always be generations of preteens looking for idols, and now there is a group who sings for them and who will never grow old. Marlene Sanders, CBS News, New York.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS.
They're a sensation in the Spanish-speaking world. In Mexico City, they drew a crowd of 105,000, and throughout Latin America, their appeal has caught on big. And this weekend, they've sold out 4 shows in New York at Madison Square Garden. There are 5 of them, all Puerto Ricans. They range in age from 13 to 15, and their fans are even younger. Menudo in Spanish means small, as in small change, but the group known as Menudo means big money and big crowds, mostly of pre-teenage girls. Many of them came to JFK Airport at 9 in the morning, even though the group wasn't due in until 5 in the afternoon, and the temperature was in the 90s. Some of the kids belonged to Menudo fan clubs.
We listen to their records, we practice.
Practice what?
Their dances, how to dance like them. We dress like them sometimes.
What's the special thing about them?
They sing nice, they dance nice, they're cute. They're gorgeous, especially Charlie.
At last, their young heroes arrived on their own plane, minus Ricky, who had the flu and would fly in later in time for their show. The group was the brainchild of Edgardo Diaz, who at one time worked for Up With People, a conservative American music group with idealistic overtones.
I thought there was something missing in the music. There's music for the kids and from adults, but nothing for the preteens. And for that reason, I began with Menudo.
The group must be kept perpetually young to guarantee its appeal to preteens. Few of the performers stay beyond age 15 as telltale beards and deeper voices develop. Since its founding in 1978, Menudo has become an industry: movies, records, clothing, and souvenirs, and a weekly Spanish-language television show in New Jersey. Success can have its drawbacks. The boys are virtual prisoners in their hotel because of the fans. Does it bother you, all these girls screaming and carrying on?
No, that is my work, and I like.
Miguel is now 15. He's beginning to look too old for Menudo. He's been told it's all over in August. He says he's unhappy and happy about it.
I'm going to give the opportunity to another kid to enjoy it, the group that I can enjoy. But happy, I will miss them. They're my brothers.
Menudo is learning English and reaching out for a new audience.
Get yourself together. Time's come for you to make the move.
There will always be generations of preteens looking for idols, and now there is a group who sings for them and who will never grow old. Marlene Sanders, CBS News, New York.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS.
The trail of terrorists that began just a week ago with a bungled holdup of an armored car in suburban New York stretched today to a farmhouse in rural Mississippi. 3 men, you may recall, died in that holdup attempt. A suspect was gunned down later in a Wild West chase through New York streets. Steve Young in New York reports today's dramatic developments.
About 100 FBI agents from several states converged around 6 this morning on a farmhouse in Gulman, Mississippi. They arrested 33-year-old Cynthia Boston without incident in connection with the October 20th Brinks robbery. There were a dozen children in the farmhouse at the time of the arrest. One of them described an invading army.
It was some tanks outside, and then helicopters started flying over the house, and they had the road blocked off.
Authorities say Cynthia Boston was Minister of Information for an organization called the Republic of New Africa. Bond was set at $500,000. Police believe she and another suspect, William Johnson, passed through New Orleans on the way to the Mississippi farmhouse last week after leaving New York. Authorities confiscated weapons and 4 cars packed with clothes.
Why would the FBI be interested in this house?
I really don't know.
Why would they be interested in your daughter?
You'd have to ask them that I really don't know.
Police confiscated a van at the farmhouse, believed to be the same van spotted outside a Mount Vernon, New York apartment used by some of the robbery suspects. Police are still searching for Johnson and 2 members of the Black Liberation Army, Donald Weems and Marilyn Buck. In New York, a federal magistrate's complaint today was unsealed. It quotes witnesses as saying that Johnson and Buck loaded the van at one of several houses used by the Brinks robbery suspects. Also named in the complaint is Sam Smith, killed in a shootout in Queens, New York last Friday. The United States Attorney announced he is impaneling a grand jury to investigate whether a racketeering conspiracy existed between various radical groups involved in the Brinks robbery.
Obviously, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is looking into the possibility that this group was engaged in other similar activities. That would give rise to a prosecution under the federal racketeering statute.
In other developments, 2 other suspects, Eleanor Raskin and Jeffrey Jones, members of the Weather Underground, were arraigned in Jersey City, New Jersey. Nathaniel Burns, arrested in the Queens shootout, was arraigned in a hospital. His attorney, William Kunstler, charged that Burns had been severely beaten by police.
He was pummeled, beaten, kicked.
There are now 9 people linked to the October 20th robbery. The investigation has moved through 5 states. Steve Young, CBS News, New York.
Edmund Perry. They all said he was a young man with a future, a young man who made it from these streets in Harlem all the way to the campus of Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. Perry graduated 2 weeks ago, an honor student on his way to Stanford University. Edmund Perry was 17. Now he is dead. It happened here on this street near Harlem. According to the police, Edmund Perry and another teenager jumped an undercover decoy officer, threw him to the ground, and began beating him up. When the officer pulled his gun, fired a shot that hit Perry in the stomach. The bullet killed Edmund Perry. The other teenager ran away.
My child never had any trouble in school, at home, in the streets. He had tons of friends and people who respected him.
How could it happen? Edmund Perry had no criminal record, no apparent reason to rob anybody. That Perry was black, the policeman white, has become an issue.
Let us be clear that in 1985, our young people are an endangered species. This violence must stop. The police are clearly out of control.
Open ranks, march.
The shooting comes while 8 city policemen are under indictment on a variety of charges, including using an electric stun gun to torture confessions out of young drug suspects. But today, officials said the officer who shot Perry acted in self-defense. Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, New York.
In 1981, the number of major crimes reported to the New York City Police Department reached a record high. That year, the police received reports of 637,451 major crimes, things like murder, rape, robbery, and assault. The next year, the number of reported major crimes went down 5%, and just last week, the NYPD announced major crimes were down another 9% last year. That doesn't mean, however, that it's a heck of a lot easier being a New York City cop under the gun. Ed Rabel reports our Sunday morning cover story.
When you put that uniform on in the morning, or when you're going in for a 4 to 12, and you put that on, you know that the challenge is there, you know the dangers involved.
Joe, hold on.
Can't let your fear overtake yourself, because if you're going to go out there being scared, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get your partner hurt.
Shootout at 564 Bristol. The person's armed, the male white, no further information available.
One that don't want it. You didn't get one yet?
Put you more on your guard when you're out there, right after a shooting or something. Then you're like a little high-strung, maybe.
Nobody told people going out. Oh, they don't. Not just me.
Being a cop is not easy work. It is especially tough in a place like New York. In the past 2 months, 2 New York City policemen have been shot and killed, 6 others wounded, one of them the first woman police officer to be seriously wounded on duty. Being a cop is not easy work.
I think the death of a police officer is something in which we all die a little. We all lose something when a police officer is killed.
Benjamin Ward is the police commissioner of New York.
I think it takes away from us as a civilization, and I think our civilization dies a little bit, and we as a part of that civilization die a little as well when we lose a part of the institution that we've put into place to protect all of us.
These last 2 months have been an emotional time for New York's 25,000 police officers. 2 deaths out of 25,000 may not sound like much, but the news went through the department like a thunderbolt. To the cops, they were as brothers.
Being a police officer is a dangerous profession. Every police officer who joins the force knows that, and thank God most of them will not suffer injury and death.
Edward Koch is the mayor of New York.
They are, to put it very graphically, that thin blue line that protects society from brutality, from savagery, from the criminal assaults.
What angered the police, and indeed many New Yorkers, was that one of the accused killers turned out to be on parole from a manslaughter conviction. Outraged, police and citizens renewed their demands to tighten parole requirements or abolish parole altogether.
I think policemen become incensed, maybe even a little frightened, although I'm sure they wouldn't admit to that, when you know that there are some people, I call them crazies, that think it's open season on the police officers.
The trouble is not limited to New York. Assaults on the police are a nationwide problem. In Florida last year, 6 police officers were killed in the line of duty. 11 were killed in Texas, and in California, 9. Being a cop is not easy work. This is a story about street cops, about the work they do. It is a story about Pete Sullivan, who is 26. It is about Shirley Martinez, who is 23. And about Bobby Reed. Sullivan and Martinez are rookies on the New York City police force for a little more than 2 months. Reed is 37, a veteran, a cop for 16 years. He is their training officer.
Okay, let's go.
This is a story about 3 days in their lives, about what they did and what they learned along the way, and how they coped with the knowledge of the killings and the fear and tension of the job.
You wear the vest, wear it concealed. It doesn't do you any good
to
wear the vest on the outside of your clothes.
Outside.
That's why these bad guys are shooting cops in the head, because they all know we're wearing vests.
It is 9:06 a.m.
We are now in the confines of the 6th precinct, Greenwich Village. Every wackadoo in the world comes through here one time or another. You know Edith?
Don't listen to him. My name's not Edith. My name's Shirley. He calls me Edith. I don't know. Yeah.
No, you know I'm not ignorant. You know what she called me? First day she met me, Archie Bunker. She says I'm old school. It's better if you don't even bunch up. One individual walk on the other side of the street, one individual walk on this side of the street. This way you're not an easy target. Of course you get edgy, but I don't think the average officer in the street, good street cop, becomes over anxious. I think they use good judgment, and I don't think they go out and look for trouble. Usually trouble finds you. You don't have to go look for it in this city.
There's too many perpetrators out there, and there's not enough of us. Too many bad guys, and not enough good guys out there. And what happens to a police officer can happen to anyone, but being that we're in the uniform, we're more vulnerable.
If something happens in here and you're dealing with people and there's more than one individual, there's 2 or 3 individuals, and one individual runs in one direction, the other one runs in the other one, you don't split up your partnership. You stay together. That's how a lot of officers get killed. They split up their partnership. I honestly believe these people out there are playing for keeps. This day and age, every other individual has a gun, and there's no hesitation whatsoever to use that gun when they see a uniform.
They talk about the crime and everything, then they point the finger at the police. It's not our fault. A lot of these people have been arrested previously, and they're back out on the street again. And it's a fact they're going to do it again. So why let them out? They should be put away for a number of years.
It's getting the habit of looking in the stores when you walk by and stuff. If you go by a store and they got advertisement signs that are blocking the view, like this one right here that you can't see in through the window and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, going and advise the owner of the place that, you know, to his disadvantage to have posters up like that.
Yeah.
You go by in a radio car,
Blocks
you're
the
walking
view.
by on a foot post, you know, you can't see in a location. There's been plenty of instances where cops have walked by locations. There's been a holdup going down inside, and the guy will come out when the officer passes and put the gun to the back of his head and take his revolver. It's been anywhere from 4 to 6 shootouts right here on 8th Street.
It's just so dangerous for them, and they're all so young, and they look so vulnerable.
Elsie Martinez is Shirley's mother.
What do you say to her when she goes off to work?
Take good care of yourself, wear your vest, don't trust anyone. I love you.
Up in front of that van on the left, up in front of the green van on the left. Pull the vehicle over there when the light changes.
It is 10:59, the morning of a slow day. Sullivan and Martinez are pulling over cars that have gone through a stop sign. Reed watches carefully. It is a mundane task. All cops do it, but it is a job they are never comfortable with. There is always the possibility of dangers, seen and unseen.
Yeah, there was a stop sign. You probably didn't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let me just check over. You have your license and registration?
Nobody likes cops at moments like these. It is a thankless task. Who among us would take that kind of work? It is a hell of a way to make a living.
You know about it, sir.
Since they are the epitome of decentralized government, they're the only government that's available doing most of the day, particularly after the normal business hours. They're the ones that are available, and so they become, in effect, City Hall, they're government.
I want to take a walk around here. What are the best streets for me? Because everybody keeps on telling me how dangerous it is.
Yeah. No, well, it's Sunday.
Right here. Yeah.
See, what happens on Sunday, the bad guys, they go out all night.
Mm.
They get drunk and they do their... That's
We're expecting them to be law officers, we're expecting them to be psychiatrists, we're expecting them to be lawyers and sociologists and even priests and rabbis and doctors on occasion to deliver babies. There is no one who's asked to do so much.
This is yours.
B
for black.
I was looking for an older wanted in the connection of a shooting. The incident happened in front of 308 Stratford Street, Brooklyn, New York at 0900.
It is 7:01 p.m. in Greenwich Village.
The Perp is armed. It's a male white. No further information available on him.
A group of young boys gathers around patrol car number 2081.
That guy was smoking a roach.
Smoking a what?
A roach.
What's a roach?
You know, one of those...
Oh, I thought you meant a cockroach. How do you know those terms?
They say it.
What are you doing over here?
Hackerville is my friend, Robert.
A few minutes later, a young man in his 20s joins the conversation. Listen carefully.
Walk the street. I'd have to be institutionalized for the rest of my life. So I went catatonic, schizophrenic,
You guys
homicidal,
listening to this?
suicidal.
Listen to this.
You learn a lesson. Stay away from
Listen to
dust, burn out drugs. Smoke a
Listen
little
to
pot. Yeah, it's cool. Drink a
No,
beer.
pot isn't even cool.
No, that's my, it calms me down.
Awful, man. You must have done some heavy LSD, boy.
No, never.
Huh?
No burnout drugs.
No.
Little toot,
Yeah.
little smoke, and I drink wine. That's it.
All right, be good. Let that be an example to you, man. Stay away from drugs.
He's allowed to carry...
He's crazy.
Is he allowed to carry a gun? He has a gun in his
It's crazy.
He's allowed to carry a gun?
No.
He has a gun in his... behind his jacket.
Are you serious?
I swear we saw it. We saw it. See that lump?
Sure it wasn't a knife?
What? No, it was a gun. I swear.
Yeah, go on. That's okay.
Yeah, this is a cop.
For sure.
Oh, this is gonna be good for TV. Good color, All right, be cool. Don't worry, open it up. No, there's CO2 in it. Crack it. Shouldn't be loud. Super point.
It is a pellet gun, illegal to carry in New York, but only a minor violation. Martinez, Sullivan, and Reed are lucky. They were vulnerable in their car and didn't realize it.
Thank you, guys. Okay? Guys, it's top shelf, all right?
I told you to come over.
Yeah, you're regular Joe.
Bobby Reed has been a cop for 16 years. He is thinking about retiring. For Pete Sullivan and Shirley Martinez, it is only the beginning.
Always be ready, you know? I know you didn't notice me, but I undid the safety on my holster. Those kids were sharp, though, weren't they?
Yeah.
Not all cops are good. Not all cops are heroes. But they do put their lives on the line every day. And each year, some do get killed. And there are funerals. 2 New York City cops were killed this year, 6 others wounded. It went through the department like a thunderbolt.
Female states, perps broke down her door, almost inside the location now. There is no further information on this job.
It's not at all that unusual to see drugs being sold on street corners in New York City. For a long time, part of the city's Lower East Side had been described as an open-air supermarket for drugs. But a highly publicized massive crackdown on drug dealing in that neighborhood has had a dramatic effect. And as Chris Kelly reports, it has also had a dramatic side effect.
Since Operation Pressure Point began in January, police have arrested more than 2,700 dope dealers and addicts. Over $1 million worth of narcotics and cash have been seized in the target area, New York's Lower East Side, considered to be one of the nation's largest illegal drug marketplaces.
Got pretty scary out there?
Yeah, it got scary out there, and it got scary, you know, inside of me.
Shelley is among the hundreds of desperate addicts turning up recently at drug treatment clinics because they can't find drugs on the streets. The crackdown has resulted in a flood of people seeking methadone to ease their craving for heroin, a flood the clinics can't handle. Treatment experts complain the crackdown wasn't coordinated with them.
I'm faulting the inability of city, state, and federal government to have ensured, even several years ago, that there was adequate availability of treatment for every single heroin addict who wanted it and who needed it.
Officials estimate that more than 1,000 addicts currently are awaiting treatment, which is at least 6 months away.
3 weeks is an outrage. 6 months is obviously a much greater outrage, and we're trying to get the state and the federal government to provide the medical treatment which these people need.
Furthermore, there are indications that this massive crackdown against drugs can result in more crime, more violence.
The crackdown, you know, put a big panic on the street. People couldn't cop dope. You know, it made people, you know, a lot more desperate. I would have definitely been deeper into crime.
People are going to be trying to get it any way they can. And if it means that they have to kill someone, hurt someone, that'll happen.
Despite the flood of addicts engulfing the clinics, the city is expanding Operation Pressure Point into Harlem, where the problem is even worse. Chris Kelly, CBS News, New York.
Starting today, there is new help for the homeless, a $100 million federally sponsored program. It's aimed at the mentally ill who are out on the streets in 9 cities. Experts say it provides hope for shelter and treatment. Bill Whitaker has our report.
Charlotte, North Carolina, a hot meal program for the homeless. Charlotte is one of the cities receiving money, $14 million in federal and private funds to help house homeless, mentally ill people. It's a problem one might not expect to find here.
I think this is a sign of our times, that it's happening everywhere. It's not unique to large urban areas.
It's estimated that between 20 and 50% of the people living on the streets of America's cities are chronically mentally ill. Many are there as a result of deinstitutionalization, a decade-and-a-half-old practice of placing all but the most severely ill patients back in the community. But some, like Curtis Samuels, have had nowhere to go.
I was out on the street for 6 months, and I didn't have nowhere to stay, no one to turn to.
Curtis Samuels is off the streets now. Like most of Charlotte's mentally ill, he's involved in an extensive mental health system of support programs for those living independently, of group homes and halfway houses. Still, even with a mental health system as broad as Charlotte's, some fall through the cracks. Fred Larson lost his job and now fears he too may end up on the streets.
I have no more income, no way to pay the rent.
With the new program, we hope to take care of all of them. Somehow this seems the light at the end of the tunnel for us.
No one believes this is the solution to the problem, just a step in the right direction. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Charlotte.
New anti-drug legislation became law this week, adding money to the drug battle after years of cutbacks. Eventually, that could mean more room at treatment centers. But for now, many addicts are finding they have to go elsewhere for help. Victoria Corderi has that.
26-year-old Audrey Arrudia is walking the long road back from a heroin addiction that nearly killed her. She's been drug-free for just over a month.
I was actually afraid to be straight. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I wanted to stop. It had been so long since I'd spent a day straight that I thought, I can't deal with this. This is too heavy.
Her family also desperately wanted her to stop.
I'll tie her to the bed if necessary. I'll, do whatever it takes to help her, because she's literally killing herself.
The Arrudias were turned away when they tried to get Audrey into a treatment center. The reason, overcrowding. And the high-profile anti-drug bill signed by President Reagan this week won't do much to change the situation.
Federal funding for drug treatment has dropped 46% over the past 6 years, so this new money may only at best bring spending back to 1980 levels.
For us, really, it's really a drop in the bucket, whatever relief they sent us now.
Meanwhile, families of drug addicts may have to follow the example of the Arrudias. They dried Audrey out at home.
We're willing to go to the wall to do whatever it takes. What about those that don't have families like this?
They must wait, sometimes as long as 6 months, to get into a publicly funded treatment center. In New York alone, there are an estimated 250,000 drug addicts. Rehabilitation facilities for only 45,000.
Right now, we're totally overloaded. The phones literally ring 24 hours a day.
Just try now, hon, okay?
Audrey is now trying outpatient therapy, an alternative experts recommend for detoxified addicts who can't get into long-term residential rehabilitation.
I'm looking for a new way of life. I've got new things to look forward to, new goals.
Audrey is lucky enough to have a family support system. Many addicts on waiting lists do not, and treatment experts fear the road back for them may be a dead end. Victoria Corderi, CBS News, New York.
In a 3-year study released tonight, the Carnegie Foundation is sharply critical of the nation's undergraduate colleges. The report says that colleges should toughen up degree requirements and allow professors to concentrate more on teaching than research. When we return, we'll have a report on forest land in Maine.
New Year's Eve, but in New York, of course, they go down to Times Square, where the giant globe or ball begins a slow drop down. Since 1907, that lighted globe has taken the plunge, and every year, 500,000 people cram their way into Times Square to watch it together. So imagine the fretting over reports the ball might make its final fall tonight, because the building it slides down might not be there next year, victim of a massive Times Square facelift. But on the day of this year's dry run, the corporation in charge of the ball said that will fall next year, even if it has to find a different building in Times Square. Maybe the Renaissance Center in Detroit would be, and we'll teleconference it back to New York City. That's the Big Apple, of course. It's a big globe, but that's one New Year's tradition, a festive one. We're going to be examining another much more grim holiday habit, drunk driving, and the efforts to stop it. That's coming up in our spotlight. It's 10 past the hour.
New York City, the financial and cultural capital of the nation, the center of the universe, isn't it? But the old town's having some problems with its image these days. Now there's an official campaign to get New Yorkers to be more courteous to each other, even to out-of-towners. New York, New York, a part of the record of who we are.
What a city. What a sight. The Big Apple, New York, New York. A cinematic dreamscape. The birthplace of cliches.
New York, New York, the wonderful town. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. The people riding all around. New York, New York.
What kid from the Midwest hasn't looked up on the silver screen and thought, one day, I'll make it there, and if I can make it there, well, you know the words to the song. But fact is, these days, to make it in New York, guerrilla training will serve you better than singing or saxophone lessons. The city is a filthy, stinking, broken mess. It's Calcutta without the cows. If you're lucky in New York, the street where you live doesn't blow up. Every day, another avenue closes down while the pipes and sewers beneath it collapse or explode. Water main breaks are more regular than most public transit service here. Frankly, it's a good way to clean the subway stations. Visitors here can always expect a royal welcome. It's New Yorkers' way of saying how much they appreciate out-of-towners. And while you're in town, you might think about going to a Broadway show. Tickets cost $55 a piece. It's a bargain for the entertainment bonanza. We suggest you drive when you come to the city. You'll be greeted by New York's unofficial ambassadors of goodwill.
Try to make a decent buck, sir. Have a heart, Mercedes.
Who hold you hostage in your car until you fork over some cash for them putting some glop on your window.
Better than them stealing from us.
It brightens your view of the sparkling city. New York is a polite city, so if you park your car, do as New Yorkers do. Make sure you put a sign in the window like this one, this one, this one, or this one. It's only courteous to let criminals know in advance that they'd be wasting their time if they broke into your vehicle. Perhaps when you're here, you'd like to spend a day at the beach.
Syringes do not belong on the beach. Colostomy bags do not belong on the beach.
Or take a tour of famous New York Harbor. Rare is the day when barges don't burn out of control, or when hundreds of thousands of gallons of heavy crude doesn't spill into that historic waterway.
You're a very rude young woman.
I don't think I was treating her badly.
Then you must be from New York.
New Yorkers love their city, and what's not to love?
Being miserable and treating other people like dirt is every New Yorker's God-given right.
Argue with your landlord, and he'll literally take your face off.
There were so many people around, and I was right in front of my apartment building. I didn't feel that I would be in great danger.
Neighborhood block parties take on a whole new meaning here. It's always a party atmosphere. Rents are a little steep, though. $1 million buys you 2 bedrooms. Folks who can afford that don't complain about New York, though, because they have a place in the country to go to get away from Fun City. Folks who can't afford that, and believe it or not, there are a few, live in the street. I suppose they'd be more welcome if they paid taxes. If this looks a little like Civil War, you're close. Staten Island is a part of New York City. For some reason, the folks over there want to secede. We're not making this up. Manhattan dumps its garbage there, but the resentment runs deeper than the garbage. Even with all the garbage, Staten Island is nicer than Manhattan. And the islanders who go to Manhattan can't figure out why they get charged so much for going to a place that's so bad. Bad.
Home sweet home.
Some New Yorkers are distressed because of all the bad things that have been happening lately. Wall Street's laid off thousands of workers, and the real estate market is getting soft now. But our friends, the Japanese, have been coming to the rescue, buying up important buildings Americans can't afford to hang on to anymore.
We'll have Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, too.
Who says this isn't still the greatest city in the world? I love New York.
I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York.
For March 9th, 1990, that's the record of who we are.
I'm longing to stray and step around the heart of it. New York, New York.
Murder in the United States. It happened once every 27 minutes last year. That's more than 52 murders a day. That's more than 19,000 murders a year. This time it happened to a young woman who'd been in the big city only 6 weeks. This time, Bruce Morton reports, attention must be paid.
Caroline Eisenberg was young and gifted, 23, a Harvard graduate, come to New York to study acting at the prestigious neighborhood playhouse, veteran of college productions and a bit part in a made-for-TV movie.
Just remember us when you're editor.
Early yesterday, Caroline Eisenberg died violently, stabbed to death on the roof of her own apartment building by a would-be rapist who escaped. She died screaming. Neighbors tried to help. Several called 911 when they heard her.
Help, he's killing me. He's stabbing me. I'm going to bleed to death. And she started screaming, he's stabbing me, he's stabbing me. My God, I'm going to die. And all I could think to do was scream out, leave her alone. Get away from her. Leave her alone. Get away from her. And she just kept talking in numbers. She was shouting out, telephone, anything for help.
Susan Glassman, Caroline's roommate.
She's fighting for her life. More power to her. I'm proud of her, you know? I'm proud of her. She did a damn good job living, even when she was dying.
Boston friends remembered a brave and gentle woman.
She was very loving to the other actors. She was courageous. She wasn't afraid.
Young and gifted and dead by random murder in a New York apartment building full of frightened people. Kay Demetriou, who has cut hair in the neighborhood for almost 50 years, is unsurprised.
It's a way of life. The last 3 years, 5 people were killed in this neighborhood.
Murder is incongruous in this season of supposed goodwill. But random violence is part of the soul of people a poet once called man unkind. A rebel of the 1960s said violence is as American as cherry pie. He could have said as American as charity or caring. They are all a part of us. The FBI says that strangers murder strangers in America more than 2,500 times each year.
The terror in those screams, you never forget them. You never forget that.
Bruce Morton, CBS News, New York.
Violent death already had struck the dead woman's family. Her brother-in-law was killed last year during a robbery in Charlestown, Massachusetts. Random murder in today's America is the subject of Bill Moyer's commentary tonight.
That's peace, like you used to say. That's peace, like you used to say.
Every Sunday morning in Upper Manhattan, before any of the heartfelt hymns come alive,
we know how to look beyond what's on the outside. We know how to look deep on the inside, because you may miss a treasure by judging a book by its cover.
Before any of the sermons scripted to set souls on fire are ever spoken.
Now here we stand at 120th Street and Lenox Avenue.
Harlem is already awake. The curious have already gathered. Harlem, New York may have been Bill Clinton's second choice, but it is destination number one for some 1.4 million tourists from around the world each year. Welcome to Intruders.
That
Please, I don't mind y'all being out here, but please give me a break. I live in the block.
No problem,
I still
man.
live here.
Asian and European tourists by the busloads in search of an American moment in what has long been called the Mecca of Black America. This birthplace of legends and lyrics, revolutions and revolutionaries, where whites from downtown came uptown to dance to black music. This Mecca in the midst of a makeover. After decades of neglect, double-digit unemployment, the ravages of drug abuse in a community where 51% of the adults never finished high school, Harlem had become the metaphor for all that was wrong with urban America. But that image is changing, block by block, brownstone by brownstone.
On this level, we have a living room, a room that was originally, I think, the dining room, but we turned it into a playroom.
A makeover that includes Andrew Kuhn and his wife, Heather Kelly. She's a teacher. He's an investment banker.
To those of us who are not from New York, what's a white guy from St. Louis and a white woman from upstate New York doing in Harlem?
You want to take a shot at that, or you want me?
Well, I think that the simple answer is you know, more space for your money. I think it's the reason a lot of people are moving up here, regardless of race.
What did your friends say when they said, guess what? We found a great place and we're moving to Harlem?
They said that we were crazy and they would never do it. Definitely. What kind of ice cream will you get?
With 2 boys and a 3rd child on the way, they've settled in nicely.
Of course, I know the reputation that Harlem had in the 60s and 70s, but you know, when you come up here and you see it, you think, where did that come from? When you walk down Convent Avenue, you feel like you're on a street in Europe. You know, it's just gorgeous.
You know, our neighbors are great. There's a sort of a social dynamic that exists here that just doesn't exist where we lived on the West Side.
Neighbors like David and Paula Hill and their 3 children. David's a real estate developer. Paula's a commercial banker.
Right, but we wanted to stay in the city. We initially started looking in the suburbs, and then we decided that we really wanted to be in the city, and we looked in Harlem because homes were affordable here. And also the types of space, the space that was available and the detail in the architecture was very different from what we're seeing elsewhere.
From their 4-story home with a balcony and a view, they welcome the changes in Harlem and one of their newest neighbors, a former president.
Hey, Bill, stop by.
Just one more brother moving to Harlem.
Exactly. As they said, you know, the first black president.
How are you, my friend? Good to see you.
A president who will come to Harlem, in great part because of Congressman Charles Rangel.
How are you? Good to see you.
I need you to help.
Okay.
Harlem's native son who will welcome Mr. Clinton, regardless of his motives.
Skeptics raise the question that while Bill Clinton's presence may help Harlem, Harlem helps Bill Clinton's legacy because of his problems, because of the Lewinsky history.
Well, I like to get away from Lewinsky, but agree with how you ended up. For whatever reason, the African-American community, thank you, had a feeling for Bill Clinton. And the compassion that they've had, how are you, my friend, went far beyond the mistakes that he made while in his office. I remember leaving my apartment building, and a lady said, an old lady said, I want you to continue to fight for Bill Clinton. And I said, yes, ma'am. And then she said with a scowl, and you keep your pants up, too.
So Harlem is clearly ready for Bill Clinton. But while the former president may find this part of Manhattan a comfortable fit, there are parts of this revival longtime Harlem residents are less comfortable with. Progress has a price.
The turning point may have come in the early 1990s, when Harlem was designated one of America's original empowerment zones. Small businesses could obtain low-interest loans. Bigger companies qualified for special incentives to set up shop. It all led to the biggest real estate boom in New York City.
And when you think of a house from the 1970s selling for $20,000 and now being worth nearly $1 million, that's a far better return than you could get in any stock or other investment.
Architectural historian Michael Adams.
All of the families who lived here were either Irish or German or Catholic or Jewish.
He treats a walk through Harlem like a stroll through a museum.
And here we had this place where Richard Rodgers grew up, the composer of Oklahoma and all these incredible musicals. Then at the house here, number 7, lived the mayor of New York in the 1890s, Mayor Thomas Gilroy.
For Michael Adams, there is a jewel on every corner. And with the changing face of Harlem, cause for concern.
As I walk through Harlem and see people different from me walking around here and obviously living here, I feel a kind of ache and fear that this place that I think of as uniquely representing my heritage and culture is turning into someplace else and a sense of helplessness in a way to be able to preserve some tangible presence of that African American cultural capital in this special place.
Gentrification is a word that does not sit well here. An uneasiness reflected in the work of street artist Brett Cook Disney.
This is an assistant principal from around the corner. Because you buy a co-op on 116th Street does not make you a Harlemite. There is a culture here, you know. Prior to when Bill Clinton came, prior to this development, there were people here. There are families here, there are assistant principals here, and that cultural space is not, I think, being considered or supported in the same kind of enthusiasm.
The remake of Harlem also worries Reverend Calvin Butts, pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church.
Gentrification is not altogether bad, but unless it is checked, it has the potential of pushing poor people out, and that is not good.
But he is less concerned about what is brought in than what is left out.
Culture. When people come to Harlem, particularly people who come from other countries, especially European visitors, that's what they want. They want to come to the church. Do you have a gospel mass? They want to dance. They want to hear the music, the hip hop, the bebop.
But the Gap, the Starbucks,
I mean, that's nice, but that's not where they come. And this is the thing that's missing. After residential development, commercial development, educational development, the one thing that Harlem is not doing enough of is cultural development. The clubs, the dance halls, the jazz spots, the theater.
With all this economic development and the businesses and the new homes, is there room for that, you think, in this new Harlem?
Absolutely, there has to be. Without culture, development falls apart. Without culture, you can't save the children. If nobody's preserving the songs, nobody's preserving the dance, you know, nobody is helping to preserve the flavor. Rappers got it, you know, flavor. That's what Harlem gives to New York, it's flavor.
It is the flavor of Harlem that has attracted the famous, the fallen, and the millions of faces in between for generations. It is that flavor which could either be spoiled by prosperity or seasoned for the better. Those who have walked this way the longest now wonder which way their Harlem will go.
Not long ago, a Time magazine cover story called New York City, the Big Apple, a rotting apple, a city that was losing jobs, tourists, and the middle class. Admittedly, there are still too many people unemployed and uneducated, but real estate is booming, tourists are flocking, and more the Big Apple is beginning to look like apple pie. But is it all just on the surface? No. Go down into the subway.
Please stand to the side, let the exiting passengers off, do not block the pathway.
Subway riders in New York actually letting passengers off, being obedient.
Continue to move, be considerate of your fellow passengers.
They're not shoving, they're not pushing, they're moving in a single file. Who'd have thought? It's part of a new test program called Step Aside, Speed Your Ride.
Stay clear the closing doors, please, and have a good day. When I say good morning to them, they're responding, good morning back, have a good day.
We're in New York, right?
Yes, we're in New York City, in the heart of New York City, Grand Central Terminal.
And people are being cheerful.
Yes, they are.
Polite.
Polite.
They're not pushing, no more elbows.
It really is like the siege has lifted after 10 or 15 years of a siege mentality, of triple locks and pit bulls in the living room and all that. It has, in fact, changed.
Hard-boiled, longtime New York reporter Pete Hamill is now the editor of the New York Daily News.
Crime is really down.
Yes.
This is not some kind of fudging of numbers.
No.
This is not a seasonal thing.
No. It's not only statistically recognizable, you can feel it in the sense of the city. The sense of menace has ebbed.
No wonder. The city is leading the country in reducing crime. Murders have been cut in half since 1992. New Yorkers seem to have relaxed, and you see one New York contradiction after the next. Polite subway riders, and you can find peaceful, quiet moments at Bellevue, the city's largest hospital.
4 or 5 years ago,
I were here in the ER with you, would I be seeing something completely different? Would I be...
More noise, more blood, more people with gunshot wounds, and every day, almost every day, every other day, we'd see someone who was shot to death. We just don't see it. It's a much less common event.
Here's another surprise. Tourists flocking to Harlem.
Willkommen in Harlem. Dutch or Francais?
Français.
Ah, Francais. Bonjour, madame.
With crime way down, Harlem today is one of the most popular stops for tourists.
Yeah.
42nd Street, once the boulevard of peep shows, now you see Mickey. Disney's coming here. And Times Square, notoriously seedy, grungy Times Square, it's amazingly clean. Up and down New York, we found signs of life improving.
Can you taste it?
Why not? It's the best in the world.
We're at Katz's Deli on the Lower East Side.
I want to ask you whether you detect a change out there in the city.
Yes. There's less crime, less crazy idiots running around, and there ain't too many dope addicts running around.
This is Mott Haven in the South Bronx, where drug dealers used to own the neighborhood. James Roundtree runs a soup kitchen. If I were standing right here 5 years ago,
you would be standing in a wasteland with the addicts all around, winos and everybody around. You know, this is a whole different situation. This was a no man's land.
well, what about Crown Heights in Brooklyn, the site of rioting 6 years ago between blacks and Orthodox Jews? Youth counselor Richard Green was on the front lines back then. Today, he and Hasidic Rabbi Shea Hecht say the edge is off. Now, are you two friends?
Depends what you call the word friends.
We may not hang out on Sunday together, but we respect each other. Bottom line is I can pick the phone up and give him a call. We're no longer two ships passing each other in the night.
I believe there was a tremendous change and an honest change.
As we were talking, the people in that neighborhood began shouting at us.
You gotta speak to people that live.
Where do you live?
Do they want to speak? That's what she said.
We expected to hear that things had not changed that much for them.
Do you feel that things are different?
Oh, yeah.
Better? You feel it? You can sense it.
It's better.
You speak to the average citizen out there on the street, and they will tell you almost unequivocally that they feel a different climate.
There is some kind of monumental sea change going underway among young American blacks, because that's where the crime rate is down. And whether that was the end of the crack fade, the Million Man March, nobody knows, because we as reporters have done such a terrible job, we don't know why.
You can't really put your hands around it.
Exactly, because I think like anything truly interesting and monumental in a society, it's complicated.
The whole question of the New York turnaround is complicated. Some say it's because of the boom on Wall Street and the general improvement in the economy. Others say it's the subsiding of the crack epidemic. Still others point to the city's new crime strategy.
Gary, what does it look like on the 104 side? What kind of a week have you been having?
Every week at 7 a.m., the NYPD's top brass gathers at headquarters to zero in on one precinct's performance at a time.
16 robbery arrests so far last month. If you look at the robberies, the majority occurring in Sector John.
It's called ComStat, short for Computer Statistics. Computer screens show captains block by block which crimes are up in their neighborhoods, and then they are held responsible for bringing those numbers down.
For the record, on that 7-3 precinct case, crime scene was never notified. We'll hope that gets corrected.
And they'll tell you the way to get things corrected is to put the cops where the crime is and keep them there.
The difference between this time and every other time is that we have not left that location. We still have 2 officers assigned to that place 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
And it's not just the hardened criminals they're going after. They're also aggressively cracking down on petty offenders like loiterers, public drinkers, and squeegee men who mopped your windshield whether you liked it or not.
It's essentially saying that you have to deal with the small problems. You can't just ignore them completely, otherwise they become big problems.
The man who takes and often gets the credit for the new crime strategy is the tough, combative mayor, Rudy Giuliani, the first Republican to run the city in 20 years.
Professor Wilson, about 20 years ago when he was at Harvard, first propounded this theory that if you have a building and a couple of people break a window in your building, you better fix that window right away, because if you don't deal with it, eventually somebody will break another window and another one and another one, and your building will fall down. Let's put some emphasis on street-level drug dealing, not just let it run rampant. Prostitution, graffiti, aggressive panhandling.
One of the things he's done is he's gone after the little things. How much has that been a factor in giving people hope and making people feel positive?
I think that it's symbolic in a way. It's saying you can get something done, because if you can tell the idiot with the boombox to knock it off and not get shot, you've already, and he actually turns it down because someone might come over and tap him on the shoulder and take him down to the police station. I think that gives you hope that you want to live in that society.
Columnist curmudgeon Jimmy Breslin disagrees. You don't see the panhandlers on the street. You don't see drug dealers on every corner anymore. The squeegee men aren't out there.
Oh, the squeegee men.
Yeah.
Oh, God, what a danger. Do you know how many murders they committed, the squeegee men? How many crimes they committed?
You don't buy this theory that if you do these small little things, life gets better?
What about 1 million people in school that you're not teaching, and while you're concentrating on squeegee men, so that the people driving home to Jersey aren't bothered? Come on, please.
But there's this theory that if you do these little things, the people get
Whose theory? Somebody from Harvard or Yale has a theory on that broken window in a building or something?
Yes.
Let them stay in New Haven, huh?
There's no renaissance in Black and Latino and poor and working class communities.
Richard Perez, a leader in the Hispanic community, says the police strategy gives officers broad license to stop and search anyone they want. The fact is that while crime is down, complaints about police harassment have gone up.
The quality of life stop and search laws we hold are a violation of constitutional and civil and human rights, and what they amount to is a virtual state of siege in poor communities where the police say if a community is drug prone, if there's drugs being sold in that community, they have the right to stop anyone, demand identification, the kind of identification that they want. My son wears baggy pants, and I worry that he fits a profile in the minds of many white police officers who come from segregated communities outside New York City, who view him first not as a human being, but as a potential perpetrator.
There's a concern that with all the police on the street, stopping people left and right, that what you're going to end up, if you don't have it already, with the civil liberties problem. That people's rights to walk down the street are being abridged.
Well, let me tell you what rights were being abridged before this. People's right to live was being abridged. People's right to be able to walk through a place and not be mugged or raped or beaten.
Is there not a trade-off? You don't feel there's a trade-off there?
Would you give up your rights? Would you give up your rights? Would you agree to live under virtual police state conditions and have your children?
You're exaggerating.
I'm not exaggerating.
It's no exaggeration either that the mayor's cuts in government jobs have produced pockets of high unemployment, that there's a real crisis in the schools, that Giuliani sliced $1 billion out of the education budget, that classrooms are overcrowded and reading scores low. Now the mayor promises to put half that money back, but spending per student is still the lowest it's been in 9 years. But the critics are often drowned out by the boosters who say the crackdown on crime has created such a feeling of rebirth that companies and megastores, wary of moving to New York just a few years ago, are streaming in. And thanks to generous tax breaks, Disney is investing $8 million to renovate a theater on 42nd Street. But some say the city is in danger of being Disney-fied.
Why should Times Square be safe for children? I mean, they have the whole rest of the country.
Writer Fran Lebowitz says Mayor Giuliani's vision of New York is sucking the life out of the city.
He's kind of turned this from the, Big Apple to the Big Apple pie.
What do you say to those who say people like you are romanticizing the gutter?
I'm not romanticizing the gutter. I didn't move here when I was 18 years old because I heard how clean it was. You came here because you thought it would be interesting, and it was. And it's significantly less interesting now.
What do you think of Giuliani?
Not much.
But there are those who think that without his hard-nosed, uncompromising personality, nothing would have changed in this town. There are people who feel that you need to have a mayor who's an SOB to lead this tough city, and that if he's not difficult, maybe a little mean-spirited, that you can't lead this place, you can't run this place.
Being tough and being biased are two different things. He's unfair. He's rewarding those who have, and he's punishing those who have not. That's not tough. That's just ugly.
I didn't vote for him, but it must be said for him. He seized the moment. He came in and said, we're going to change this, and he did. I wish there was more grace to the man. That's all. I think you can have order and grace at the same time.
Poor people, middle-class people, rich people have the sense of you as someone who is treating the city like we're all a bunch of children, that you're our daddy, and you're a strict daddy. This is your image.
Well,
Do I have to tell you this?
I don't care what my image is. What I care about is the results.
Have you been to Times Square?
Yeah, with the celebration of the corporations on the signs. I love it. There's no dirt.
Yeah.
No dirt at all.
Yeah.
City dies unless it's got some dirt and a little raciness.
You don't think that it's good that you can walk down 42nd Street and hookers aren't coming up to you every
Well,
second?
who's going to be there? What's
Well,
on
they're going to have
42nd Street
Disney.
now?
There's going to be
Disney. I'll take the hookers.